The Demon in the Basement. There are certain places in life that one should never go, hidden spots in the corners of the world, those shadowed corners in your own home that feel like they belong to something else, something darker. For the Darnell family, that place was the basement. It was an ordinary house by all means, 2 stories, old but sturdy, nestled in a quiet neighborhood far from the chaos of the city. For most, it would be a dream, a charming little cottage to start a family and live out a peaceful life. But for Thomas, Emily, and their young daughter, Lily, the house had come with something more. Something they never expected and could not have prepared for. The basement was there when they moved in, just like any other, with cobwebs in the corners, the scent of old wood and mildew lingering in the air. It had a door that creaked when it opened and a staircase that led down into darkness. But it wasn't until the second week they lived there that things began to change. Little things at first, a strange sound echoing from below, like scratching or scuttling, always at night. At first, they dismissed it. It was probably rats. The house was old, after all, but the scratching grew louder. It wasn't rats. It sounded like something large, moving in the dark. And then the whispers started. It wasn't just the house settling, as they initially thought. Emily, in particular, would hear the faintest murmurs from the basement, her name being called out softly, as if someone were beckoning her. Sometimes she would catch a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye as she walked past the basement door, something moving, or a shadow that shouldn't have been there. "Thomas, you got to go down there and check it out," she said one night, her voice trembling. Thomas, ever the skeptic, laughed it off. "It's just your imagination. It's an old house. These things happen." But the unease never left, and neither did the scratching or the whispers. Soon, Emily would find herself unable to sleep, staring at the dark ceiling above their bed, the sounds growing louder and louder each night. Then Lily, only 5 years old, began to act strange. At first, it was little things. She would play near the basement door, smiling to herself, humming softly. But then Lily began talking to someone. "Who are you talking to, sweetie?" Emily asked one day as she walked past Lily in the living room. Lily just smiled up at her, her eyes wide, unblinking. "The man in the basement," she said, her voice oddly flat. "He wants to play with me." A chill ran down Emily's spine. "What man, Lily?" But Lily only shrugged, her small fingers tracing shapes in the dust on the floor. "He's nice. He says he'll help me." By now, Thomas began to feel the shift in the house, too. The heavy silence that settled over it at night. The lingering feeling of being watched, of being hunted by something unseen. He had tried to dismiss it, to chalk it up to stress from the move, the new responsibilities of family life. But even he couldn't ignore the truth much longer. One night, after weeks of restless sleep and unsettling occurrences, Thomas could take it no longer. He grabbed a flashlight, muttering to himself, and headed down to the basement. He was going to confront whatever it was, whatever had been terrorizing his family, and end it. The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended, the air growing colder with every step. He reached the bottom and turned on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the thick darkness. The basement looked the same as it always had, cobwebs clinging to the ceiling, boxes stacked in corners, tools scattered around in disarray. But there was something different now, something in the air. He moved deeper into the basement, his heart racing, the beam of his flashlight shaking in his grip. The further he went, the colder it became, and the more the whispering increased. It was faint at first, like distant voices, but as he ventured further, the whispers grew louder. They were everywhere now, surrounding him, like a chorus of ghosts. He tried to shake it off, to focus, but then he saw it. In the farthest corner of the basement, a dark shape moved. It was too big to be a rat, too unnatural to be a person. It was something else, something that didn't belong. Thomas froze, his breath catching in his throat. The shape seemed to pulse, expanding and contracting like something alive. It was a black void, a darkness that seemed to absorb the very light of the flashlight. And in that darkness, he saw eyes, piercing, glowing eyes, watching him, hungry. The whispers escalated to a cacophony, all calling his name now. He felt his legs go weak, his body trembling uncontrollably. He wanted to turn and run, but his feet were rooted to the spot, as if the ground itself was holding him there, preventing him from escaping. The eyes in the dark grew larger, and the shadow began to move closer, slow but deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. Then, from the dark shape, a voice came, low, guttural, and filled with malice. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered. Thomas gasped, backing away, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He tripped over a box, landing hard on the cold concrete floor. The flashlight rolled from his hand, its beam cutting across the walls before fading into nothingness. The shape lunged. He screamed. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the demon's face, a hideous grin that stretched impossibly wide across its features, its teeth sharp and jagged, blood dripping from its mouth. When Emily woke the next morning, Thomas was gone. The house was eerily quiet, save for the faintest scratching noise coming from the basement. She called for him, but there was no answer. She searched the house, checking every room, every closet, every corner, but Thomas was nowhere to be found. Her heart raced as the hours passed, the silence of the house pressing in on her, suffocating her. Lily was the one who found him, or what was left of him. She was standing by the basement door, smiling in that strange, vacant way she had developed over the past few days. "Mommy, Daddy's with the man in the basement now. He's playing." Emily froze, her blood running cold. She tried to pull Lily away from the door, but the little girl resisted, her grip impossibly strong. "No, Mommy. He's with him. He'll never come back." Terror washed over Emily as she realized what Lily was saying. The man in the basement wasn't just some imaginary friend. It was something far darker, something ancient and evil. And now, Thomas had become part of it. With shaking hands, Emily called for help, but deep down, she knew it was too late. That night, the demon came for Emily. The house shook with the force of its presence, the walls groaning as though they were alive. The whispers returned, louder than ever, as if the house itself was trying to swallow her whole. Emily tried to escape, but every door she opened led her back to the basement. The shadows were everywhere, closing in on her, suffocating her. And then, just as she thought she couldn't take it any longer, she saw them. Thomas and the others. They were standing in the basement, their eyes hollow, their faces contorted in agony. They were no longer human. They were part of the darkness, part of the demon itself. "Join us, Emily," Thomas's voice echoed, distorted and warped by the demon's influence. Emily screamed, trying to pull away, but it was too late. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the demon's eyes, glowing like coals in the dark, and its grin, wide, cruel, and filled with hunger. The house still stands. No one lives there anymore, but sometimes late at night, if you're walking down the street, you might hear the faintest scratching from the basement. And if you listen closely enough, you might hear the whisper of the demon, calling out to you, inviting you to play. Because once you enter, you'll never leave.